Hello, we are going to continue with modeling this Design in 5 protocol with Phase 2, Analyzing Standards. So in Phase 1, we chose the standards and we considered different ideas around community and soccer to kind of ground the standards that we had determined. And now we're going to move to this Phase 2. And in Phase 2, we're going to analyze standards so we really can figure out what are all of the learning goals that are going to be needed to understand and grasp to achieve these standards. So if we look at Phase 2, there are a number of parts. The first thing we're going to do is circle verbs, and this is a very common thing to do. Sometimes we call this unpacking standards, but essentially we're trying to get the gist of what does the standard really mean. Then we're going to underline some concepts, including some vocabulary and any context that tells us in how students need to use and demonstrate that learning. We'll write some learning goals, and then we're going to use the concept of a ladder to put them in order of complexity. So let's take a look. Here is what we targeted for our 5th graders. These are those big standards. So what we're going to actually look at are the 5th grade standards, which are right here. And to make this a little bit easier for us to see, I'm going to double space. Okay, there we go. So the first piece was to circle standards. So I'm actually going to bold them right now so that you can take a look at this instead of trying to navigate the circle on my computer. But so determine would be a verb or a concept action we wanted students to do. Explain. Now supported is another key word I think is important. Summarize. Draw. Demonstrating. Locate or to locate. To solve. We want students writing, supporting. I'm underlining a few more, or I'm bolding a few more things other than verbs, but these are those the action we really want students doing. We have introduce, state, create, organizational structure. I'm going to do logically grouped to support, and then we need provide. We have supported again. We have link. Provide. Gather. Summarize or paraphrase. All right, so those are the verbs that I circled to kind of get a sense of the action we want for students. Not all verbs are created equally in these pieces. Sometimes the words actually add just detail to the bigger idea we want students to grasp. So, for instance, this one, draw on information from multiple print or digital sources, demonstrating the ability to locate an answer to a question quickly or to solve a problem. So really, we're wanting students to tap in or draw on this information, and then in doing that, they're going to show that they can locate an answer or solve a problem. So that's that. So we're not probably going to use all of those to create our learning goals, but it gives us a sense of what we want students to achieve. Now the next step is from circling verbs to, or bolding, to underlining the things that are important. So let's take a look at this. So they're going to determine 2 or more and the main ideas. And they're going to have to use key details to support those main ideas. And of course, the notion of text is important, but I think we'll leave that for now. Okay, drawn information from multiple print or digital sources. Oh, this is important. It's multiple print or digital sources. So we know we have to have more than one in this particular case. So students are going to have to be navigating and synthesizing and determining main ideas from multiple texts. So they're going to either answer a question or solve a problem. now we have targeted this idea of opinion pieces. So some of this is going to, so we're pairing these standards together. So some of the assessment will, and the instruction will certainly involve opinion pieces on topics or texts. So they have to support a point of view. So that's a vocabulary word they're going to need to know. And of course, reasoning and information. Okay. Then they're going to introduce a topic or a text clearly, state an opinion. Now this is kind of leading us to the criteria that we're going to need to use for that summative assessment. So I'm going to put opinion again. Oh, this concept, an organizational structure. So they're going to have to create some of that structure either through their writing, maybe some graphics. It's going to depend on what we choose. And then, of course, they're going to have to think about a purpose. So that's going to also inform the context of the assessment task. So we're going to have to set a purpose for which they're going to write. Logically ordered, again, that's kind of criteria. And we're going to be talking about facts and details. We already have opinion, reasons, and this is kind of the grammar part of this. But really this linking those, using linking phrases like that creates flow in writing. Concluding statement, that's also going to be something they have to include. And this is kind of criteria as well. The idea of relevant is important. And this is this relevant information from experiences or from the print sources. So we're going to have to take a look at that. So they're actually saying that they can use I think what we'll probably do though is it won't be this, not from their experiences, because I'm actually going to cross that out, because we're going to actually tap into those print and digital sources because we've connected it to this reading informational text. So we're gonna connect those two. And they are going to have to summarize and paraphrase information in notes and finished work and provide a list of sources. Okay, let's do that. Underline that. So we're going to have to build into our instruction part of the process of multiple ways of taking notes. Okay. All right. So in some ways, underlining can sometimes, like I just underlined so many things, it maybe doesn't help us really understand, but it does make us go through each of these different statements and get a sense of what we're seeing. So, take the underlining with as it's important to figure out what are the nuances that we have to pay attention to. Things like multiple sources, providing a list of sources, and the things that, and even criteria that we might include in our assessment. All right, so after I've underlined and circled, now I'm going to start to write some learning goals. And I'm going to use the student-friendly frame that is I can. So we're right here on number 3, writing learning goals, using some of those circled verbs. What do students need to know and be able to do? So let's see here. If I go up to this first one, determine 2 or more main ideas of a text and explain how they are supported by key details. Summarize the text. So there are multiple learning goals here. So I'm going to say I can determine, I'm going to use the word because determine is a pretty specific word. 2 or more main ideas of a text. All right, and then I can explain how supporting details in a text, actually, I'm going to use the word how key details in the text support the main idea. Okay. And then I can summarize the text. Okay, so we're in 5th grade. Sometimes it's helpful to add a this means statement. So I might say this means I can explain the beginning, middle, and end of a text. Or we could even just say, I can summarize the text, and that's really when students are able to do both of those two targets. But we can play with that as we go. All right, then the next one, drawing on information from multiple print or digital sources, demonstrating the ability to locate an answer to a question quickly or solve a problem efficiently. So I'm going to say I can draw on the text to answer questions or solve problems. Now draw on. This could be cite. I can cite the text to answer questions, but I think draw on actually maybe insinuates cite and explain. I can write, yeah, so I might even say I can cite evidence from the text to support my thinking, and I can explain how evidence from the text supports my thinking. Yeah, so we could, because this one is about citing evidence, and this is about explaining how that evidence ties to my thinking or my claim or my argument. And because we're going to talk about opinion, I'm going to actually put opinion in there. This might not always be true for each, because sometimes it's a claim, but in this case, we're using the language of the standard, which is opinion. All right, so now let's take a look. We've got a few more writing pieces to look at. So write an opinion piece on topics or text supporting a point of view with reasons and information. So I can write an opinion. And I think it's more of a, I can write an opinion using support from the text and reasoning. Okay. And I can and I'm actually going to change this. I can write an opinion text using support from other sources, from, we're going to say multiple sources. I can write an opinion using support from multiple sources. And then this is a really interesting piece about this. So these are going to be able to be kind of ordered in a cognitive manner. These are going to provide us criteria for the writing piece, because look at this. I can introduce a topic or a text clearly. So I can introduce, or maybe I can write an introduction. And then this means I can state an opinion. This means I can introduce the topic. This means I can clearly introduce the topic, state an opinion, and create an organizational structure. know what, I'm going to have this organizational structure separately, I think. So let's do this. This means I can clearly introduce the topic and state an opinion, and then I'm going to say I can create a logical structure for my writing that helps develop a clear purpose and helps the reader clearly understand my opinion. Okay, so that one says I can create a logical structure for my opinion writing or for my writing that helps develop a clear purpose and helps the reader clearly understand my opinion. Yeah, we'll keep it at that right now. It might need a little wordsmithing, but that's the gist. Okay, so then we also need to have some linking words. So I think this is I can link. I can use words, phrases, and clauses. I can use words, phrases, and clauses to link ideas in my writing. And that just helps with flow. So we'll have them do that. And then another criteria of the writing is going to be conclusion. Let's see, what does it really say? Provide a concluding statement or section related to the opinion presented. Okay, so I can provide a conclusion, because it could actually be a sentence or it could be a whole paragraph or section conclusion that wraps up my writing. I'm going to use writing because conclusion kind of transfers to different types of writing. And then recall or gather, summarize or paraphrase information, and provide a list of resources. So we're going to have them do that. So I think well, for sure it's I can provide a list of resources used in my writing, and that's pretty straightforward. Do we have anything in here that talks about students using other resources in their writing? I can write an opinion using support from multiple sources. So I think that will do it. We could also write this though. I can gather and summarize. You know, I think that's actually going to be already up here. Yeah, we're going to leave that out for right now, because that's going to be inherent in what we want. I mean, they have to do that in order to get into this, but I think we have that represented. And if we don't, then we'll come back to that. So now, in this case, because I've paired two kinds of types of standards, I'm actually going to now take these learning goals and I'm going to do two separate learning ladders. So we're now on this fourth piece. So if I do this, I'm just going to quickly insert a text box here. Okay, so now in this text box, what I'm going to be thinking about here is, what are the simple ideas? Now these are the standards. So these are the learning goals of the standard. So let's see if we can organize these a little bit. Okay, I can determine two or more main ideas of a text. I'm going to actually put this, it's a little less complicated than, or less complex than some. So I'm going to determine two. And I think the next more complex idea is I can explain how key details in the text support the main idea. So this is where I think the idea of key details is so important, because some students will choose every detail, not just the key details. So this to me is a really important concept. And now when I think about that, when I think of these two, one of the prerequisite learning goals to students achieving this standard is knowing the difference between key details or important details and unimportant details. So I'm going to add one. I can identify important and less important details in a text. There might be a better way to say that, but the idea is to have them be able to determine what is important and what it, in terms of supporting the main idea, and what is maybe interesting but not as supportive of the big idea. Okay, I can explain how evidence from the text supports my opinion. And I can draw on the text to answer questions or solve problems. So I'm actually going to put this right here. So I can explain how so right in this beginning part, students are trying to determine what the text says. Then they're going to answer questions or solve problems based on the text. So that kind of extends it. And now they're going to have to, so based on how they answer those questions or respond to it, they're going to have to explain how that supports their thinking about their answer to the problem or the question. And I actually think I'm going to have them first cite evidence and then explain, because it's one thing to be able to cite and say, this sentence supports what I'm thinking, but it's a whole nother to explain exactly what that means. And I think this summarizing piece is going to come in right here. So what I've torn apart here, or teased out, is we have a few prerequisites, or one at this moment. I can identify important and less important details. I can determine two or more main ideas of a text. I can explain how the key ideas support the main idea. And I can summarize. And then we're going to pose some questions so that they can think about and tap these resources. In order to do that, I can cite evidence from the text, and I can explain how evidence from the text supports my opinion. Okay, so that's this on standard pieces. Now, the other thing I'm always thinking about in this context is, why do students need to know this? So we might have a more complex target that has students using. So I can use what I learn from multiple texts to solve a problem, And actually, I'm going to go back to this. I can use what I know from multiple texts, and then we'll tap into this writing piece so that kind of they start to come together. So I can use what I learn, or I can write an opinion piece using multiple texts now, why would students want to be doing this? They'd want to be looking at multiple texts to either provide a convincing case to do something, to make a decision, to solve a problem, so let's do that. I can write an opinion piece using multiple texts to solve a problem or inform a specific audience. Okay, and this would be like of a topic or an issue. All right, so I'm going to bullet that one as well. All right, there we are. So I can identify there. Now, if students are going to do this, and I'm doing this piece because this is where the relevance is going to come in. Students aren't just going to read the text to find the evidence. They're going to read these texts to be able to do something. So soccer we've been talking about. So I can imagine that maybe students are going to write a piece where they discuss how another classroom could perhaps use soccer to build community, or how the community itself could build, like in one of the texts that I found, like how the community itself could build a soccer field where people from the community could come to play, and what would be the benefit of something like that. So I'm just dabbling in what that might look like, but we'll develop that as we go. All right, so now in order for students to be able to do this, I might think about what are some other things they might need to do prior to being able to achieve these pieces, because these are all of the on standard learning goals. Let's see. I might, if I'm thinking about this and I want students to be able to really work on independently being able to engage in some of these more complex texts or grade level texts, I might say I can use strategies to find or to understand text, or I can identify and use multiple reading strategies to understand the text. No, we'll see. That might not be as necessary, but we'll keep it there. All right, so that is the reading part. And now in this one, we also have the writing part. Now, this is taking us a little bit of time, but the really interesting part about this is these set of targets will actually be able to be applied in multiple settings in multiple places. So, or for multiple units, because these are things that we're going to revisit over time. They're that essential. But it is taking us a little bit of time to do this, and that's okay. All right, so now let's look at the writing targets. These are going to also reoccur in multiple places. Okay, I'm going to add another text box because I really want these two. They're going to be similar in order, but they're not. They're also going to be a little different because they're really going to inform more of our criteria. Okay, so here we are. So I can write an opinion text. That is, we actually have that on the other one, and that's the interesting thing about the most complex targets or learning goals, excuse me. They're going to be seen on multiple ladders because that level of thinking reoccurs. So now we really have, if I look at this, we really have a list of criteria. Not so much that we're going to order them, although some are a little more complex than others. So this is clear introductions, and this gives us a little idea. This is logical structure, so that's going to be a criteria in my writing. And then providing a list of resources so that they have those resources, but that's mostly, is it right or wrong? So this would probably be the most simple part of this. I can create a logical structure. Do I have a beginning, middle, and end? I can write an introduction. Oh, you know what else we have that we need to have on here? I can use linking words. So this is really effective transitions if we're thinking about writing. So that would be the criteria we would be looking at. And a conclusion. Conclusions are sometimes a little more difficult to write well. You can restate, but conclusions are more than restating. They're really summarizing the main idea and leaving people thinking. So so this might be the way I would dabble in this, but this is actually going to inform more of our rubric creation and our criteria there. So now we have completed phase 2 of this particular assessment, this particular unit assessment. All right.